want, there's nobody here, so we don't have any public comment, I know.
Do we have a quorum? I don't know how many we need for a quorum.
We have quorum,
Yeah,
right?
we have a quorum,
Okay.
yeah.
I don't know how many.
So I'd like to
Maybe
call the
three.
meeting to order and recognize that there is no visitors from the public today. And acknowledge that Harry Glenn is on the line. Alan, are you on there? No, he's not there yet.
I'll be there momentarily. He was trying to dial in.
Okay. And Lori is here from the RGS or RSG.
Oh, Natalie.
Natalie, why did I call you Lori?
I don't know.
I have no idea.
RSA.
Well, we're happy that you're here.
Thank you. If I'm in trouble, I'll be Lori. How about that?
Okay, so do we want to discuss the minutes of the meeting of May 22nd?
Motion to approve?
Can I have a second? Thank you. All in favor? Say
Aye.
aye. Aye. And the T-BARTA appointment.
Okay, so I'll just introduce this item, unless Natalie, you or Alan, or, if you want to talk about it, but the legislation, which I'm not sure if the governor has actually signed yet.
Yes. I believe. Let me double check.
Calls for the new T-BARTA board to be seated within 45 days of the bill being signed. And it would have a representative from PSTA and HART. I've spoken to Catherine Egan at HART about it, and a number of you and other board members, and a suggestion I think that might be good would be to have whoever is the chair of PSTA be the T-BARTA rep on this new board. It has to be a board member of PSTA. It can't be me or a staff person. And Catherine has agreed the same and has talked to her chair, who currently is Les Miller, and they're supportive of that idea as well. So again, so my recommendation would be that the chair of whoever's the chair of PSTA would be the the assigned representative to the new T-BARTA whenever it gets together again. This is the legislative committee, so if you would like to make a recommendation to the PSTA board at its meeting at the end of this month, that would be what I would.
Madam Chair, my only comment when Brad and I met was, I think that's a great idea, but I think it should be that they get first right of refusal, because we don't know what everybody's schedule is. I mean, I don't know what Darden's schedule is.
Well, if I could speak to that for just a moment. Hey,
Good afternoon.
thank you for joining us. Let the record reflect that Commissioner Charlie Justice has joined the committee. Thank you. We're talking about the T-BARTA appointment, Charlie.
Okay.
Brad has made a recommendation that the chair of the PSTA be the appointed person to T-BARTA, and Doug is saying something about first right of refusal only because we don't know what scheduling is going to be. That brings us up to date. And I was just getting ready to make a point that the new board has to be seated, if I understand correctly, on July 1. And the last T-BARTA board that was meeting on Friday, there was discussion about the first meeting of the new board would be in August. And per the legislative intent, this new board is supposed to come up with a plan to give to the legislature by the time they go in session next
January.
in January. They go in early this coming year. So my concern about the transition of chairs, the way things are currently structured, is that right in the midst of all that work taking place will be a new chair will come on as PSTA. I think you all know that I'm poised to be that person. And we'll have to pick up from where they started with all the discussions. And so just like we did with, I think there was the same kind of a situation going on with the MPO, and that the person coming off of MPO there's a new, it's the same situation with our appointment to the MPO, correct, Brad?
Yes, both our appointment to the MPO and T-BARTA would have a similar situation, although there's not really a succession planning thing for the MPO representative, like would be in this case where the chair, but Bill Johnson is the current rep to the Ford Pinellas, and he term limits off of the Clearwater City Council in March of 2018, and the Ford Pinellas appointments
Take place in January.
January 1st are all of their rotations, so the idea would be maybe for him whether or not he should be there just for 3 months, or whether a PSTA should put a new person on effective January 1st of 18. I think that would be a similar kind
Yeah,
of
that's what I'm
situation.
saying.
Yeah, because some of these never all seem to line up.
Yeah.
And so they meet in August, and then when again, not till,
No, they meet in August, and then they are charged with coming up with a plan to.
So from a
you know,
timeline standpoint, the next step would be is at the June board meeting, the recommendation that you guys make would need to be adopted, so that as of July 1, when this goes into law, then we have a named member. Then from there, their first meeting won't be till August. They will then meet subsequently between August, from the initial inaugural meeting of the new constituted board, to January, when they have to make their recommendations to the legislature based on the work they did between August and January. So you want the same, from continuity, we would want to have whomever is assigned in June to be the same person who's going to see it through the end of next session. So if the current chair is transitioning off, you may want to set the policy as chairperson, but then give them the flexibility then to delegate that, and they could do it to the next person coming in, just so there's flexibility.
and to that, I think to that point, and I know you're poised to be that person, and I'm fine with that, but I don't think we as PSTA have a written rule that, secretary becomes vice chair, becomes chair. It's not really a written policy, and case in point, Mayor Bajowski, was poised to be in there and got, so are we saying it's the chair come January, that it would, or the incoming chair, but we wouldn't even know that, would we? Potentially, it's you, but.
Well, the other thing is, does every chair want to be?
Well, that's my point about, I don't know what people's personal schedules are, I don't know what Darby.
Because I know on the county commission, the person that's currently appointed to T-BARTA is Commissioner Seal.
Right.
And so,
And I don't know how many other things Darden is on, or you're involved in how schedules line up,
Well,
any thoughts, Commissioner?
No, not really. I don't have an overwhelming core value on who should be our rep on that. I think you have to this is unique because it's new to a
That's
certain
right.
degree, but you kind of have to look at it 2 ways. One, are we looking at simply for this, and obviously, theoretically, you'd be the incoming chair, and this obviously is an issue you're very close to, or do we set a policy that it's the chair or the chair's appointee, knowing that we have a lot of these different boards that we're on, that the chair is the person, and chairs come off and on, and so, but it would be a recommendation from this committee to the full. Is that how we're doing it? So, I think it might be something that we need a more full discussion at the full PSTA board anyway, so. That's my initial reaction, not having thought about it before sitting down.
I'm trying to be somewhat silent because I do have a very vested
Sure.
interest in this piece of legislation that passed, and you all know that I was instrumental in putting that interlocal agreement together with Hart. So
I think there could be value in having, again, I think continuity is kind of a key element that I think that we want to make sure that whether whoever the appointee is for the transitional period, but also I think to Brad's point, Hart also has an appointment, and I think having some consistency and how, if there's opportunity to have that synergy where the appointments are being, managed similarly, so that there's some consistency, that's not a bad thing. I think that could be valuable. And I think that it's more about, too, it's having the right person with the right expertise. and the interest. Because this person needs to be actively engaged and really driving the conversation for our interests.
And I see Janet doing that. I do. And I understand what she's saying, because if Chair Rice starts and then she has to pick up the baton in January.
January is really the hot date.
Yeah.
The spin-up time is going to be very short. Whomever steps in is going to have a very, if not already actively engaged and actively educated on the inner workings of it, I could see it being a challenge, only because of the fact that there's so little time frame to negotiate.
And I get back to the point of Mayor Bajowski. I mean, we assume that that's the way it's going to fall out. If we say that, as Commissioner Justice said, you know, that it's the chair or the chair's appointee, assuming that it's going to go the way it normally does as opposed to the way it went last year, but,
Well,
because when do we appoint then? When do we pick new board members? When does ours happen, in March?
all of the PSTA officers are January 1 also.
Oh, they are.
Chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer. And then the other committee appointees
Oh, okay.
or whenever. So usually January 1.
But when do we appoint?
When do we have our elections, the selection of chair and vice chair and all of that? When do we typically do that?
Typically, the nominating committee meets right before Thanksgiving in November. It goes to the December board, and then they take their seat in January. County commission seats and I think City of St. Petersburg seats are October 1. Some of the cities like Clearwater or March, they're Pinellas Parks like that. So that also plays into it. That's why Bill Johnson is leaving, not because of PSTA, but because of Clearwater, because of his city. Well, I mean, the options are to not have this committee. We've had a good discussion here. Not have this committee make any recommendation. Just take this to the full board for a longer discussion, or recommending Commissioner Long. Just be the person, which is how we do it for the MPO position. We just name a person, and you don't have to be that way. No matter what happens with the chair.
And I guess at that point, it doesn't really matter what Hart does. You want the best person
Yeah.
that represents the organization. So,
And you say it has to be the chair. It can be the chair or the vice chair, and she's vice chair, then she'll be chair next year, and she could still hold a position.
Yeah, could be that way.
or we could just pick.
Well, let's move it along. I move that we recommend to the full board that we appoint Commissioner Long as the PSTA representative on T-VARTA.
Second?
Third.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
And I think it'll work out that it'll be chair,
And if the board has different thoughts, we can, but at least this gets us to that point of
Yeah,
discussion.
It will, thank you.
Exactly.
with the thought that it's probably the chair or the chair's appointee anyway, but just in case we get a bump in the road, you should be.
Good job.
Good
Thank
job,
you.
everybody. Thank you for moving us along.
Absolutely.
Alan, are you on the phone yet?
Yes, I am, Commissioner.
Okay, good, thank you for joining us. So do you want to go first on the legislative update? And then we can talk, Perry can talk about the federal, wherever we are with the feds.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to add in, some of the appropriations issues that were handled this year. Obviously, I know you've all heard by now that the governor did not veto our PDD money for the Clearwater, for the bridge project. So I will tell you that the term bloodbath has been used here in Tallahassee for the last couple of weeks. It was a tremendously long veto list. I think that is to the credit of this committee and the board and your broader team to be able to keep that off the list. Senator Latvala certainly being extremely helpful in that regard. Anything, especially with the fact that this wasn't on the work plan. I know we've talked about that in other meetings, that was going to be a challenge. The fact that we were vetoed, I think, was just due in part to those leaders that we put in place to be our champions here in the legislature, and the good work of Brad and Natalie and the whole team, and Ron and everybody. I think it really is an accomplishment for this session. And so that was really our biggest issue this year. There was some additional language in APD in the bill about moving some transportation disadvantage to APD. We're still waiting on an answer. As you all know, especially with special session last week, the staff kind of, got buried again. And so I'm waiting on Penny to give us some guidance on exactly where that language came. We have a pretty good idea of where it came from, but we obviously want to confirm that before we get too engaged. She promised me that she would give me some direction this week. So I will, if I don't hear back from her by tomorrow morning, I will hit her up again, just a reminder that she's promised that. So really, I know Ron and Natalie certainly probably have some things to add as well, but just a big congratulations to everybody, initially on that $1 million. That really is a pretty big deal in this year's budget cycle. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, Natalie, would you like to?
Well, I mean, I can give a general update because that's obviously the one that was specific to us. But as you all know, we went through a special session this last week. They went back up based on the call of the governor. I think there was a perception that they were going back for 3 days with agreement between the House, Senate, and the governor's office, which very quickly became obvious that that was not necessarily the case. But the outcome, although it was quite chaotic, bloodbath is a good way to put it, there was a lot of patience necessary to survive the last few days. But at the end of the day, they ended up coming to an agreement, whereas the educational funding for K-12, FEFP was increased. They worked through some issues with higher ed, some veto overrides, about $60 million were put back in capital outlay for higher ed. They were able to work through getting the economic development components funded back, so the governor was able to take that win home with EFI actually having a little bit of a variation in how they did some economic development incentive funds. $85 million was put into a new job growth grant program that will be pretty autonomous for the governor to manage. And then they got the Visit Florida back to $76 million, kind of their base budget is restored. Additionally, in the wheeling and dealing, obviously medical marijuana rulemaking was completed, and they came to terms on that. And then in addition, at the very last few minutes, they were able to find $50 million for the dike that the governor had been part of his priority budget. So they were able to come in for a landing. As we exited about 5 o'clock on Friday, everyone was patting themselves on the back. Everyone was claiming to be victorious and be winners, and it was something that we were able to move forward with. Hopefully a little bit more. Hopefully a little more harmony going into the summer as we prepare for the next session, which is just around the corner. Committee week starting in September, and us being on the clock again in January. So we're hoping that that the short time that's available to them will heal some wounds so that we can come back and maybe not have the same kind of strife that we've had this session. So I think other than that, we had already given the full update from the legislative session as it related to us. So I think that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, we had, I think you are trying to work with Senator LaValla, maybe to have a ribbon cutting or a little ceremony about our PD&E money.
Yep.
So hopefully that can maybe happen.
Well, and it was, as we talked about at the end of the last session, they needed a few minutes to kind of regroup and come back, and so today's the first day back. We're not going to call Jack today.
No.
But yes, it is. He is aware that we have an interest in circling back and doing that to make sure that we are getting the best public relations bump from it too. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the main purpose of it.
Yeah.
And then second, I think we are getting together with Union on staff. We'll be getting together later this month so that because the session is starting early and because the committees will start in the fall, we'll try to meet this month, already start preparing for next year's 18 session, so that when the legislative committee meets in July or August, you'll see a draft already, a draft prioritization list for next session.
Jeez.
Just continues on. Yeah. Is that it?
All right,
There's
so-
no end to this date, but.
Is that the end of the?
That's really it. There's nothing more really to report this time. We'll just have to regroup and start focusing on 2018.
Jeez.
Okay. And Brad, do we need to introduce this gentleman that's hovering around here?
I'm good.
I think we do.
Oh, I'm thinking. No, I'm
He's
not.
helping with the IT.
This is Greg Williams. He is
Hi, Greg.
helping, I think, with the computer or something.
Yeah, I'm with IT. My name's Greg Williams.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'm taking over for Boo today. He's not here. So-
Okay, thank you.
All right.
All right, Harry, do you want to speak to the federal?
Oh,
Hello? Who did we lose?
Maybe we lost Harry, maybe Steve.
Commissioner, this is Steve Palmer, that might have been Harry, because I know he was on the call, but he may have had to jump off a little bit early, so I can do the federal report if that's okay with you.
That's fine with me. Please carry on. Nice to hear from you.
It's good to hear you all, too. Two things I wanted to touch on today. One of them is the fiscal 2018 appropriations process is continuing to starting to move ahead. I shouldn't say continuing, but it's starting to move ahead. Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao is going to be testifying twice this week on the proposed budget. She's going to be in front of the House and Senate Appropriations Committees, and it will really be the first time she'll have to defend the budget. And, you know, as you recall, the budget proposal proposes to terminate all small starts projects and really cut back on all of the other capital investment grants so that only the existing full funding grant agreements would be funded. So she's going to face some questioning on that, and we certainly will let you, we're going to cover those hearings, and we'll let you know what comes out of those hearings. And then second one, and then in fact, just as on other, there are 12 different subcommittees for that handle the budget, and one of the VA military construction subcommittee is actually marking up its bill tonight. So the process is actually going to start moving fairly quickly in the House because they have a goal of trying to pass all of their bills by the end of July. And so transportation is maybe near the end of that process, probably sometime in early July. But we're going to see some fairly significant movement ahead on that front pretty quickly. And then I also...
Hey, Steve, just real quick, it's Terry. Sorry, I cut myself off. I'm back on. I wanted to say that Chairman Diaz-Balart really appreciated your letter from the board. We took that up, handed it in to him, and he was very appreciative that you guys wrote that letter, and he said he enjoyed the meeting with you.
Thank you very much. We likewise as well with him.
Sorry, Steve.
And then, no, that's okay. I'm glad you jumped in. I wondered if you were still there. So the other thing I just wanted to mention, last week, President Trump had his infrastructure week, which you probably heard a little bit about. And just, you know, there were 2 or 3 things that I wanted to highlight that he was talking about. One of them, you know, on the first day, he had an announcement every day last week. First day, he was calling for legislation, Congress to pass legislation that would move the air traffic control system out of the FAA into a nonprofit corporation. Obviously, we're not going to dwell on that right now. Some of the other things he talked about were, you know, he has proposed a $1 trillion campaign for infrastructure initiative, and of that, $200 billion would be new federal spending over 10 years, and I have to emphasize that's over 10 years. A little more detail came out last week. He's proposing that of that $200 billion, $100 billion be given to states and local entities to prioritize their own infrastructure needs. So that obviously would be where PSTA might be looking for some additional assistance. $25 billion for rural infrastructure and $15 billion to incentivize what he called transformational projects. There is absolutely no detail on any of this yet. That's all to be determined, but I wanted to kind of highlight that for you because that may be something you'll hear more about over the next few days and weeks, and so we wanted to kind of put that on your radar screen. They're also, the last thing they're doing is they're really focused on trying to eliminate some of the federal regulatory hurdles that exist. You know, the most obvious one is that, you know, many times when there's an environmental review, that review has to go through different federal agencies, but they're handled sequentially, and what they're trying to do is expedite those so they handle those environmental reviews concurrently and eliminate the delay that happens with those. So that if that happens, there have been a number of provisions already, the Congress has already enacted, but this is a step towards trying to actually implement those. So that could be a good thing.
So,
and that's pretty much it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So Steve, the MPO initiative to try to get a regional MPO in each of the regions without doing. Is it true that Trump or somebody avoided that?
Congress.
Yes, it is. Congress actually passed legislation, both the House and Senate approved legislation that essentially blocked that DOT rule regulation from taking effect. And it was largely because, this was an initiative that former Secretary Anthony Fox really wanted to pursue because he ran into a problem in Charlotte. And apparently there were a number of unintended consequences, and so it was a bipartisan effort to actually repeal that regulation.
Okay. All right.
Hey, Brad, it's Terry. Hey, Brad, it's Terry. Can I ask you a question on a different subject? We had talked about getting some congressional letters in support of your Lono application. Not sure what the status of that is, but we need to work on that. If you have a copy of if you've submitted it yet, or if you have a draft of it, we could draft a letter off that.
It's the next agenda item on our legislative committee.
Okay, I didn't see the agenda, sorry.
And we put together a nice little one-pager, well, it's a front and back, it's a two-pager, that summarizes what our application is going to contain when it is submitted on what day?
By the 26th.
By June 26th. So if you can see the agenda, you can see that, or I'll send it to you. I'll send you what we got. Yeah. But thank you for that. That might be a good segue to the next item, Commissioner.
Okay. Continue.
Cassandra, do you want to quickly run through this? Thank you, Harry and Steve, for that update. And again, if there's some brilliant idea that you have, or you see an opportunity for us to advocate further on behalf of maintaining the Small Start program in some venue, please let me know. I think, with the signing of that letter, the PSTA board does want to show its continued support for it, because that would have a major impact on our Central Avenue BRT project if it gets.
And Brad, this is Steve. We'll be happy to do that. I think we'll know quite a bit more after the hearings this week, and we start to see where some of the members of Congress are, and and how they react to the President Trump's budget proposal. But we will certainly keep that on our radar screen in terms of having what steps you might take.
Great. Okay.
Good afternoon. I'd like to keep this just a little bit short so we can talk about some other things related to our zero emission program. When we applied for the Lono grant last time, we were looking for our initial demonstration. And one of the criticisms that we got from the FTA was about our commitment to a zero emission fleet. And so in that process and looking at the next Lono application, as well as the opportunity to apply for funds from the VW settlement, staff sat down and looked at some of the routes that we had already planned to put on the zero emission fleet, but also what would be the next routes, and start to frame our ask for Lono and frame our ask for the VW settlement application as well. So because of the board's commitment to a zero emission bus demonstration project, we will be, I think will be or will soon be ordering those buses for a downtown circulator in St. Petersburg. This allows us to test the vehicle itself in this environment. We would be the furthest, the most southern property to have these kinds of vehicles. So we really need to test them over our heaviest load over the summer months when it is very hot, very humid, and we have a full load of people and we're trying to run the air conditioning and the engine and how that works. We think some of the advancements in the technology will allow us to do that, and we'll get some really good data out of this downtown circulator. But looking further on in our next ask for buses, all electric buses, looking at that Lono application as well as the VW settlement, we came up with 5 phases that we would propose to advance. You'll notice that on some of them we will have a charging bank. So as part of our initial purchase, we're getting a shop charger or a depot charger for each bus. And those will be out at the fueling station for our initial demonstration. As we start to get more buses, we'll have to put in a bank of chargers. And those banks hold about 16 buses. but we'll want to do it all at once, build the electric trench. And so we have some variable costs because of that.
So Cassandra, if I might ask
Yes.
you, when you talk about those 5 phases,
Yes.
how does that equate to years?
Well, it depends on if we get the funding. So if we get the funding, we could probably build this in about 3 to 5 years, these 4 routes. And that would be 31 buses, but only if we get the funding that we're seeking.
Phase 1 is the only one on there that we know for sure, because we've already ordered the 2 buses, and the board has approved the contracts, and the county has approved the funding. So phase 1 will be implemented a year from now. The buses are being made right
So
now.
that'll be operational October of 2018.
Well, the reason I ask is because I'm just back from a long trip and was reading magazines on the airplane, and there's so much new technology coming with regard to public transportation. In one particular, and I don't remember which magazine it was, they were talking about the bus systems in the Netherlands are running on wind. You heard that? It was fascinating.
Like wind energy
Sail?
Yeah.
made into electric and then charged.
Or whatever,
Yes, right.
however, yeah. So just,
They don't have little windmills on them. They are wind
That would be
turbines that
awesome.
create.
With Don Quixote driving the
Yes.
bus?
I'm just saying,
Well, he's the Netherlands.
we have to be careful about getting locked into, for large components of time, a particular thing, or so it seems to me.
Yes, well,
Right.
there's a lot of new energy propulsion systems out there. If we could one day have a solar field here and generate our own electricity and charge our vehicles on that, that makes us very self-sufficient. But this would be the first step to getting that electric fleet started. I'll run through just quickly what each phase is and what funding we're applying for, and then what share we're having of that. So the first phase, as Brad mentioned, this is the phase that is funded. We are going to be siting a new charging station in downtown St. Petersburg. We do have in that cost, we have $600,000 from, just shy of $600,000 from the BP settlement courtesy of Pinellas County. Our phase 2, which would be our Lono application for this year, would be Route 11. This allows us to get to South St. Pete, connect into our main hub terminal at Grand Central, as well as come up here to our facility. That is really important because if there are any issues, then we can put the charging station right out here, and our maintenance folks are right here. We think this would be a great application for Lono because we also have some air quality problems. This is also serves a minority and low-income area, and we think this will play very well for our Lono application. The cost of the project would be $8.6 million, and it does have that charging bank that we would install at our parking lot out here. Even though there's only 5 buses in here, we would make space for 16 with that charging bank. So in phase 3, those additional buses for Route 4, we would not need to do another bank. We'd have the capacity in that bank of chargers. So that for Route 4, that would be 10 electric buses, in addition to the 2 we've purchased already, and then the 5 for Route 11. We'd also put a charging station down at the southern end of the county. This allows that Route 11 and Route 4 to start sharing chargers, and we may not have to charge every single one. We then go out to the beach on Route 59, which is one of our heaviest used routes. We need a second charging bank here at the facility. We would ask for this 100% of VW funding. And then phase 5, go ahead and put one on the beach and get up to Clearwater, putting a charging station at our terminal in downtown. So that would be, that's really the start of piecing together route by route, which routes and where we would put the charging stations. There is a possibility that as we get further into this, the batteries are changing so fast that we may not need charging stations. But we will still need the shop chargers and changes to our facility here. So overall, that is the initial 5-phase plan that we're moving forward with in our asks. Again, the VW settlement would be 100% funding, and that's what we would seek for phases 3 through 5. So it's a $38 million program, and we're anticipating $5 million of PSTA money.
Thank you.
Pretty exciting. Of course, you know, the VW settlement is due to VW giving incorrect information about their emissions, and there's something like $150 million that has been awarded to the state of Florida for low-emission vehicles. It's part of the settlement program. And just in the last 2 weeks, the State Department of the DEP has been sending out surveys to all the different transit systems, maybe other county and city fleets too, I'm not sure, asking for an inventory of existing vehicles and plans to purchase low-emission vehicles like this. When we met with Duke Energy about our electric buses, of course, they're all in, and they think we should get all 200 of our buses replaced with electrical buses that they would power, and we'd pay them. They have been working with the east coast of Florida Electric, FEP over there, and they want us to be their. We're the one transit system in Duke Energy's area of Florida that is working with electric vehicles. So we would be the West Coast Duke property, and then they're talking. FEP is talking to Broward County about being the East Coast one. I don't think anyone really has an exact concept of how the state is going to allocate the funds, but you know, there's a potential we'll win the jackpot and get 31 buses here.
What's the time frame on the decision for that?
Not been identified yet. I know that they're asking for this inventory of our plans and our fleet by the end of June. I don't know if, Natalie, you've heard anything about it.
I think they have to spend the money within just a couple years.
Yeah.
I mean, so it would be a pretty fast.
Yeah, aggressive.
Yeah, it would be a pretty fast turnover. I think they've hired, what we've heard is they've hired about 40 people to administer the program. It might just be.
So they're looking for, I guess, shovel-ready, to use that term, to
Yeah.
that you're kind of ready to go.
Well, and we're the only ones in Florida that have a contract for vehicles.
Mhm.
Broward does not have yet, they haven't procured anything. So they tried to see if they could use ours, and we said, we're gonna use all those options up.
Yeah.
Because we're gonna win this money.
Very, very good. I like that attitude. Okay, so,
Oops.
did you have something?
No, I just messed up.
All right, so future meeting subjects, Mr. Miller?
Well, hopefully in our next meeting, we will come back to you with our first discussions of our FY18, 2018 state and federal priority list. Like both Steve and Ellen and Natalie said, I mean, things are moving ahead. We'll know more, I guess, once Secretary Elaine Chao at the federal level presents President Trump's budget proposal to Congress, and we'll know if how much we're swimming upstream or not, I guess.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I could,
Yeah.
I don't mean to back up, but just, I wanted to ask this, and obviously being a North County guy, but, you know, I looked through this, and I know we've had this discussion in the past over Greenlight, and that, you know, so much of North County didn't support Greenlight because everything seems to go to South County. And, you know, when you look at the layout, and I know they gotta be specific to the routes and the distance and the people, and you're talking about electric buses, but of the 31, there's not one bus that's north of Gulf to Bay other than the beach one. Does it not fit the criteria? Does it not fit the model? I'm just curious.
The data doesn't support it, right, in terms of ridership?
Well,
I mean, like US
how
19 and.
so how the routes were
Right.
selected to move up is the placement of the charging stations. And so we tried to pivot off an existing charging station and then pick a route that could then double up. So the Route 11 puts the charging station here at the lay-by. We're very focused on getting a charging station here at the facility. And then secondly, a route that was heavily used that could use that, there's the Route 4, so putting the charging station, so it becomes like, it's like a little puzzle.
Sure, and that makes sense.
And I would say that if we put in a phase 6, that would be the Route 78, which goes from Park Street, because now remember, we've had the charging station with the beach, we have the charging station at downtown Clearwater. So the 78 goes from downtown Clearwater to Countryside Mall. And so now you're
Sure.
building
You
your
kinda
way.
you can double dip. Yeah.
You're building your
Okay.
way north with you've got to have something to attach it to.
Leapfrog, yeah, you keep
Yes.
leapfrogging off. That makes sense. Thank you.
If you'd like us to add a phase 6, we're happy to add the phase 6. But this is the thought process of
But,
staff.
that's an
Yeah.
excellent point is, I always remember with Brad with Greenlight, and I don't mean to digress, but, it was like, do we ever see the rail as being part of it? Well, just, you could have a 6, a 7, but I think the more you show that it's a well thought out network of things that people, they're more apt to buy in,
Yeah.
Even though it might be down the road and it may change, the more they can see that it might benefit them or their kids or whoever. so.
Jacob, add the phase 6.
But it doesn't hurt, and then people get to see
it
the
doesn't
network.
hurt. But that's the reason we started to go beyond phase 2
Sure.
and 3, and we said, okay, well, now we've got to go north. The beach is so important because of what kind of what we're serving on the beach and getting the
Yep.
electric buses out there. So,
Nope, that makes sense.
but yeah, phase 6, Route 78, we'll go up to Countryside.
Yeah, that's a pretty,
I mean, that's a heavily used route.
heavily,
Yeah.
yeah.
One of our best.
The other thing I wanted to just highlight is we are trying, actually, I don't know if we actually locked down the exact date for the Heart meeting, but
Not yet, I'm not having.
we're working on another joint discussion with this committee, either this committee or the PSTA Executive Committee and the Heart Executive Committee. I think Rachel's got some possibilities in July and August.
July, I did about 6 different options in July. It's not looking very good. I may have to go a little
Ooh,
further
okay.
out, give them some other options, but working on it.
And that's a meeting.
Oh, wow.
We're adjourned.
But we are, we've got some things in the works. We're coordinating some different systems. PSTA recently lost its procurement director to Orlando. And so we're working, I don't have anything to finalize yet, but we're working to maybe try out doing a joint procurement director with Hart that we would share which I think would be a great thing if we can get that done. Because that's one of the things we're always trying to coordinate better is when we buy something, maybe if we buy it in bulk for 2 agencies, we can get a better deal. And we have been doing that from time to time, but if we had one person that was overseeing both, that would make it really.
Add that to the list of.
Yeah, it's gonna be on the list.
Interlocal
Elective,
things, yeah, we can work on. Is that it for future subjects?
That concludes.
All right. Under other business, do we want to talk about Paul Steinem and his leaving and where that leaves us in terms of moving things forward? Sandra?
Sure. I heard today there are a few names that are being thrown around. One of the assistant secretaries from Tallahassee will be coming down and being the interim. I don't know if they have, and one of the names that I heard is not interested, so I won't give you the name. But we'll just have to see what happens. In terms of working with the department, We've been talking to Bill Jones, who's the Director of Transportation, and most of the projects that we're working on are within his purview, and so I don't see anything changing immediately for us.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so, Rachel, did you say that July 14th is not a good date for our next meeting?
This is good.
This is good.
Okay.
This is good. All right,
Okay.
so does anybody have anything else, members?
No, ma'am.
Anything else? Commissioner Johnson, thank you for joining us.
Sorry, I had a medical test that I was there at 11:30.
Oh my, well, sorry for that.
Me too.
But anyway, thank you everybody for your attention, and without further ado, then we are adjourned. Thank you, Natalie, for being here.
My pleasure.
Charlie, did you see Ms. Daniels?
Now, Ron, I'm anxious to get caught up with him as well.
He's doing father duties. He's on father duty.
Oh, yeah.
He's on vacation with his son in
Well,
town, doing baseball.
For 3 or 4 years.
So-
Okay.
Yes,
I couldn't remember, I never had her, but I knew the name,
Right.
but I just couldn't place what department it was.
Yeah, she was.